Welcome everyone to the second of the Bedeck area museums. Come on in. Hi, have a seat anywhere there. The Bedeck area museum's second Prince Edward Island 150 years series of talks. We are supported, we applied for funding. I'm Doucet, by the way, the president of the Bedeck Area Historical Society. And we applied for funding during the winter, and so we are able to offer our speakers a larger gratuity than normal, which always is very miserable often without support from other sources for the funding. Tonight's talk, as I said, is the second in the series, and we're very pleased to have Mr. Arnold Smith with us. Arnold was here 4 years ago giving a similar talk, but we thought it important to bring him back because he has a special interest in costumes and clothing of the late 19th century of the Confederation period, and I'm sure he'll tell you how that arose. But I'm going to describe, for those of you who don't know him, something about his background. Arnold has always had a keen interest in history from his very young days, and his first ancestors arrived on Prince Edward Island in the 1780s following the American Revolution. Were they the Smiths or?
Bradshaw's, Emerson's, and a whole other bunch of early
United Empire
Loyalists.
Yes. He was raised and continues to live on the family farm on the Smith Road in Pleasant Valley, where his family have lived for more than 5 generations, and he's living in the same house, is it, or one of the houses that?
A house built by another branch of the family, the Sharps.
Yeah. For 40 years, Arnold and his sister owned the Bay Vista Motel in Cavendish, which they sold in 2015. And Arnold has many interests, from researching and restoring heritage buildings, collecting and restoring antiques, heritage cooking, and he sits on a variety of community and heritage boards. And I know he's been a very strong supporter of the Watermark Theatre for many years, and
Founding patron.
Are you
Founding patron.
Patron?
Yeah, founder.
Founder and patron. So that going way back to the early days of the theatre. In 1989, Arnold portrayed Andrew A. MacDonald, the youngest father of Confederation, during the 125th celebrations. And it's at that time that he first developed an interest in the fashions of the period. He carried out research, and he acquired a wealth of information on the fashions and daily life of the Confederation period. And he has been sharing that in talks since then. And since the summer of 2020, he's the chairman of the Farmers Bank of Rustico. This is a new venture for Arnold in the last few years. The Farmers Bank of Rustico and the Doucet House Museums. And since 2020, he's been involved with the museum's daily operations. And I think is that as a volunteer or as a...
No pay involved there.
No pay involved there. Well, that's very, very commendable. He and the board of those museums have seen their activities through the COVID crisis and its recovery. And in this time, they've carried out a major restoration project. I think that is the store, is it?
The old credit union building.
Credit union building. New construction near the Doucet House.
Yeah, and an engine demonstration bar.
Yep, and new programming which includes experiential meals in the Doucet house, which is the oldest house standing on Prince Edward Island. So Arnold is here this evening to share some of his knowledge and research into the clothing that our ancestors wore 150 years ago. So let's give him a...
Now, everybody can hear me plainly. I don't have to talk too loud and take the eardrums out of you. Okay. This is me when they did the reenactment for the 125th in 1989. I was 33 at the time, and I portrayed the youngest father of Confederation. Now I'm 67 years old, and that's over half a lifetime ago. And if I continued to have the beard, it would lovely white part in the center, just red in the edges. And when I did it, Andrew A. MacDonald was bald, and he had a comb over. So I had to grow a fake comb over. And at the motel in the summer, when I come in out of the wind into the office, I looked like Grizzly Adams. And you'll see the outfit there, the beautiful, well, I'll go back just one little bit. We had to do all kinds of research, so when I was Andrew A. MacDonald, and any family member came to the island, I knew the full family history. I had to know about Confederation, and I had to know all the things of daily life, and the clothing we wore, and they gave us classes and all these things, and how the women dressed, and how the fabrics were made, just every little thing you could possibly know. So when you were carrying on a conversation with someone, oh, hello there now, you would be descended from my grandson, so-and-so, and you know, all the rest of it. Oh, he was a wonderful lad, but his wife was a little hard to deal with. You know, you wouldn't say something like that, but you would be able to talk and what it was like living back then. And we were actually sort of trapped in that time area. We didn't know anything about TVs and phones and all the rest of it. We had to be able to talk to the period. And so when you were doing all this research, unfortunately, this old head's just like a sponge. If it's useless and trivial, I'll remember it, and I could remember all that stuff. And I had a great time doing it. So that's me, and I still have the same watch fob. This outfit was returned when I was finished doing it. Actually, I got to keep it a couple of years and do on-the-spot engagements for them. But you had the heavy pants, the vest lined fully to the back, and the heavy jacket. And you'd be called out to these little country churches. I was called to the South Granville Presbyterian Church just back the road from Pleasant Valley for their annual service. I almost died from the heat. Everybody else is there in short sleeves. There's no air conditioning. One door, the windows are all painted shut. And I thought I was going to pass out. It was so hot in the building. And as I'm getting ready today, I'm thinking, well, I will put on a bit of the outfit. And then I'm thinking how thankful I am, firstly, that I'm not traveling back then by a horse and carriage or walking here in the heat and the dust and all the rest of it. And for a man to appear in public in the shirt sleeves, it'd be the same thing if I was to appear in my underwear. It would have just been totally unmentionable. You would never, and a woman would not appear in public in bare arms, and you would have a hat on and all the rest of it. Social norms called for. And if you were at social functions, and it wouldn't matter how hot the building was, you would be there in all of your layers and all the rest of it, sweating profusely, but you would do it in such a gracious way that nobody would ever notice. You would never complain, because that wouldn't be good manners. And so you just had to put up and suffer. And I remember reading something once in later years, and there was this club, and Gilbert was talking earlier on, discussing some other things. And it was so hot that they did finally agree that the men could remove their jackets. It would have reached like 89 degrees in the room or something, and they just, you know, there was just no way that the men could be expected to keep their jackets on. So it was just, and the old churches with the upper balconies, could you imagine how hot they get there and all the rest of it? So this is how I got into what I'm doing nowadays. I was on the board for Parks and People, and every summer they would spend $2,000 to rent costumes for a 2-hour garden party. I said it's a little bit foolish for us to be doing this, wasting all that money and have nothing to show for it. We should create our own costumes so we could use them for other functions year-round. Oh, it's a good idea. Who's going to do it? I looked around the boardroom, and I knew nobody had any scope of imagination, as Lucy Watt would say, and no idea what a period outfit would look like or how to reproduce it. And I said, oh, my mother sews beautifully, and she can do it. I told my mother I got her this job to do it. Well, I was almost his own. She said, what do I know about any of that? I said, I can design them for you. And that I did, because I had all the classes and stuff. But we were clever. What we did was we would make a skirt with 2 layers, an over and an underskirt. The underskirt could be pasted up to suit different heights of people. The waists were all made adjustable. They could go from 28, some cases up to 42 inches. And we'd make one bodice that would fit one person reasonably well, but then we'd have a number of blouses and shawls and different things that could be worn with it. So a different variety of sizes, women, heights and waist and all the rest of it, could wear parts or all the outfit. And it wasn't just designed for one person. I designed something that fits you perfectly well, just to a T. Well, it's going to look too loose in you, and it mightn't fit you. And so by designing all this adjustability in it, we had flexibility in the number of people who could wear it. We did children's outfits, and again, this skirt here is the adjustability. This one wasn't designed with adjustability in it, and that's actually my sister in another outfit, because this poor young girl come in that she was going to play the flute, and they rented an outfit for her, and they put her in that, and it was just hanging off her. So my sister had a nice fitted outfit, and she loaned that to her, and she wore that one. And this is my niece, and she referred to it as a little gold teeth outfit, but there's the little pantaloon anklets and the shorter dresses, and the older girls got the longer their hems got. And there's myself in the background. And so in those days, what you were dealing with is, where would you get your fabric? If you had money and substance, you could buy it. If you were living just in a rural farm in Prince Edward Island, well, you would have wool in your farm from your sheep, and you could grow flax, and you could spin that into linen. And then so you could knit, spin, weave, all those things, and then it became the point where you would start actually making it into your clothing. If you're living in a rural existence, you need simple, basic clothing with full movement of the arms, actually something you could work in. But the farther you went up the social ladder, the more, and especially in women, the more restricted your shoulders became. And if you're the lady of the house, well, you need to play the piano. You need to write thank you notes and invitations. And you need to be able to eat and greet people and all the rest of it, serve tea, but you don't need to be dusting, and you don't. And so you'd tinkle a bell if you needed a book off the high shelf, and the maid would come and get it for you. And so the higher you're standing in public, the more restrictive and tighter your clothing became. The more work you had to do, the looser they would be. And the sewing, if you were lower income, all the rest, you would sew your own. As you started reaching up through the social strata, you would then be expected that, well, we'll just get Gertrude to come and she'll spend 3 weeks with us and she'll sew up our new summer fall outfits or whatever. Or she'll spend a month and a half. And then if somebody was getting married, she'd move in for 6 weeks, 2 months to do the whole trousseau. And that was a sign of, getting there, that you would have seen. And they come and live in your house. And they might even bring what was called a half model. This is a full-size mannequin, but they would be this side. And she'd have little miniature clothing made, and then she'd have 2 or 3 sleeves that she could hold up to it to show you what different sleeve styles were, and how she could arrange skirts with overcoats and or over layers and under layers and all these different things, and what different fabrics would look like by draping it. And it was small, she could carry it, and she'd have a little bag with the clothes in it, and it wasn't that she had to take 3 or 4 outfits to demonstrate. And it only took a small bit of fabric for her to work with one of those. And so now for a man, again, if you were out in the country and that, it was very basic sewing. And in St. Andrew MacPhail's wife, the master's wife, he tells the story where some women weren't sure just how to cut and pattern things and all the rest of it. They'd weave their fabric, and there was a local tailor in the community, and for a few cents, you'd take your fabric to him, and the child that wanted the new coat or whatever, he'd lay it on the fabric on the floor. You get the child to lay on, you take a piece of chalk and you draw around the child and put the pattern on it, and then you get him to move again and do the next pieces and the shoulders or the sleeves and all the rest of it, and that's how you got your pattern that way. And in some cases you might even have somebody that would take a pattern and cut it out of cheap cotton, and then you could borrow those cotton patterns. This was before the day of your paper patterns that we use nowadays. And I've got a couple of books here I'll show you. And there'd be a page, and it would have all the pieces of the pattern overlaid one over the other, and it was just one size, and then there'd be these codes to tell you how to increase it here and there for busts and hips and length and all the rest of it. And you'd need to be a magician to figure it all out, but at least it gave you the shapes of the pattern pieces. So this was a tailor shop here, and first thing you saw was the man being carefully measured. And now this gentleman here, you'd be dealing with a lot of woolen fabrics for really good dress coats. And so what they did, you would take your wool, a wet blanket, and you would lay your fabric on top of it you were going to use, and you'd put another dampened blanket over the top of it, and then you would roll it up and you would leave it overnight with your new fabric, woven fabric inside. And then the next day they'd have these great big 20, 25 pound irons that they'd heat, and they'd press it. And that you'd do that several times to shrink it and to tighten the fabric. So that's what he's doing. They actually have a woman there with the sewing machine. In 1864, there wasn't very many sewing machines on, so that's a little bit later period there. And then you'd have the tailors here that did all the fine sewing on it. And they sat cross-legged in the window where the best light was. And that's how the tailor would sew. And then you had the bits and pieces of garments up above there that would be working on. And everything was done by hand. There wasn't button holders, there wasn't all these different things. So then that room there is the sewing room we were using when we were making a lot of the 1864 outfits. These were the massive racks with all the different fancy fabrics in it. There's a little half model over here that we've got draped a certain way. This actually became a cape. Oh, that's actually a piece of tablecloth. Did become tablecloths. And so it was just and there's the iron. So we didn't have to suffer through all that stuff. And if we didn't, sometimes we actually created our own patterns. Other times we took existing paper patterns and then we adapted them. So here you have, this is in try-on. And the person that was operating at that time, they closed here and moved over to Truro, Nova Scotia and became, guess who? Stanfield. And so anyway, that's in May 20th, 1864. So there was the ability to weave vast amounts of materials in the woolens and all the rest of it. And so try-on was one of those places. But then you could also go to mills and they would card your wool for you and you would spin it yourself. And that was for knitting and different things. This is another cloth company, the Millview Cloth Mills. And they do fulling, which was tightening the fabric and shrinking it, dyeing, and Millview Cloth Mills, and then they tell you all the different things that they can do here and how to contact them. So you don't have to travel to them. You can take your woolens that's pre-woven or whatever to an existing representative, drop it off with them, and come back in a week or two and pick it up. And it's all these other things that you take. And here's where they are. Oh, quickly split here. No, you can go back there. So now, we're talking the period of 1860 through to 1870 something. So this actually is a wedding dress from early 1860s. And this scalloped edge was an old system of, now we have the modern day pinking shear. It gives you an edge that frays less. Well, this was a little piece of metal that was scalloped on the edge. And it would have been like 1.5 inches wide, it would have been about 1 inch deep. And you took and put it in a block, laid the fabric out, put it in a block of wood, clunk, and you went all around the edge, and you scalloped all the edge of the dress. And that way you didn't have to hem the whole edge, or you didn't have to worry about it fraying. It gave you a very beautiful decorative edge on it. And that was done in 3 tiers. You see the little low sleeves, the pointed piece here in the middle, and the bodice and all the rest of it, very fitted. And that would have been held up by petticoats mainly. Here's one here from 1868. Again, the tiers. More fringes on this one. A pagoda sleeve in several layers. And all the fancy embellishments. And there's a jacket on the top that comes down over. And again, these are placed, and the stripes all run around to give you all the different contrasts. And again, that's completely circular, and probably at this time, There might be a small hoop in there because they started making the hoops with the beline and other substances they could bend around, but they're fairly stiff. Okay? Here we are up in 1864. So they start getting a little flatter in the front and going more towards the back. And in this time period, you're into where they started using the spring steel that they used to put into watch springs and making the hoops with those. And by contouring the hoops and cutting the fabric that contained the hoops, they could make it go a little flatter in the front and more out towards the back. And so you'll also see, again, you've got the waist up here, you don't have the point in there. You've got the long sleeves and the beautiful bits of embellishment around the buttons down the front and tight up to the collar. You know, this would be a dress that you'd be wearing in public. And that was actually called half dress. And the ones with the sloping fronts that you'd be wearing out to a more formal occasion, dining in somebody's home or a party or a ball or whatever, that was called full dress. Because that was, you know, your fanciest dress, you were fully dressed. And I would have thought when I first heard it that this would have been considered full dress and the parts that were more exposed would have been called half dress, but no, that's the exact reverse. And now this is when we joined Confederation, 1873. So, smaller in the front, bustled out the back. And so, again, they're coming down, and it's people's preference, you know, whether it's a tight vest, whether there's like a little peplum around it, more of a jacket, all the bits and pieces, but again, fully concealed, all the beautiful pieces around the collar and cuffs. And these parts would have been put on that they would have been easily, hand sewn, but easily detachable, because that would be the first part that becomes soiled, and so you could remove those parts to clean them. And if you have a lot of dresses like that, you're probably also going to have maybe a lady's maid, and she would have this wonderful little case with all kinds of cleaning substances. So if it was a white outfit, she had little pieces of chalk that she could get the stain out of it initially, and then wipe it with chalk to whiten it up a bit more in case there was a little bit of stain left. If there was some little bit of food get on there, she'd have a small bottle of alcohol or other substances that she could just spot clean various things. And then see all the beautiful ruchings and tucks and things into it, and all the detail into that. And that involves meticulous hours of hand sewing. And at this time, as I said, there was basic sewing machines around in the 1860s, but they were just mainly, if you wanted to stitch something together quick to stabilize it, and then you'd hand stitch it afterwards. And then you'd pick those stitching out, and your beautiful hand stitching would show. And the more detailing you put into an outfit showed also that you were more sophisticated. And now, Godey's fashion magazine. People could subscribe to it. We go to the grocery stores now or the bookstores, and they have all these wonderful fashion magazines. And you look through it and you think, oh, wow, isn't that nice, and all the rest of it. And then you think, I'll get one of those for me. Well, what you might pick out would be, oh, I'll just go with this down here, but I wouldn't go with all the fancy stuff somewhere else. So yours would be a representation and influenced by those designs. And when you look at them here, as I always say, the neck and the waist are about the same size. Scale and proportion is off, but what that's to do is to show you that, well, you have beautiful hanging bows down the back. You take lace and you do all kinds of fancy things to embellish. Well, they've got lace and they've got flowers and they've got bows. So you might decide that, well, you'll just go with the little clusters and this, you wouldn't go with that design there. And this lady here is a beautiful shawl. And this lady here is a beautiful jacket with the lace all over it. Well, you'll probably make it and not include all those things. Because firstly, where would you get it? And this is the latest fashion from Paris or London or for somewhere else. And it'll take a while before it filters down to P9. And here you have a child, and look at all the ruching and that around there. You'd go insane trying to do that. I remember spending 12 hours hand pleating ribbon and stitching all the little things into it and gathering it and all the rest of it to make a beautiful little shawl for my mother for a special event. And now, these are the best things to find, because that was a fashion magazine that showed what might have been available and what influenced people. But this is a woman here, and I try to collect them that have that's either from old island photo albums that people saved, or the some that'll say Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, or Summerside, or with a little name stand in the corner. And if you can find them actually from the province, or if you knew you had relatives living and you're going through your old photo albums, and this is Aunt Sarah from Boston, well, you know it's the time period, and she somebody you know actually wore it. So here, see all the ruching and all the things in the embellishment, the cover buttons, but then just around the bottom, nothing all over the skirt. And then you can see how it fits into the waist. There's the point here. Again, a pagoda sleeve. And these little sleeves under here were basically a false sleeve. They only come up to here. They weren't actually, there isn't a blouse underneath that. And again, you have the collars around the top. Again, here's another one. And so you see, in this case, they look like little pom-poms, those little fluffy balls. And they're here again, the false sleeves, a big pagoda sleeve, and more stuff around there. And those are a great wealth of knowledge when you're looking for ideas, because there's real people in them. And this is a couple. And we know that because the picture frames, or they're in and they match. So this is her outfit. And she's a person that actually has to move and work in this outfit. So it's a little looser fitting jacket, and she has her skirt on it, and she has this up here. And they've actually tinted the, what do you call those, daguerreotypes or something, the tintypes? And so somebody's put a little rouge in their cheeks just to make them look a little more lively. And over here, you see him with his vest and all the rest of it, and his jacket's a little looser fitting. So you know, these are people, they might be merchants, they might have a store, but they have to live an everyday life. They aren't being waited on by servants. Now, this is from a much later period, but I put this in here. See the fitted jackets and the leg and mutton sleeve, but they're much tighter. But things change, but they always stay the same. And people take this and that, and it isn't, okay, we're going to sort of go forward and everything from the past gets dropped behind. And we're always going forward. They're always taking elements from the past and bringing them forward in fashion design. So you still have the same couplings here, your corset underneath to hold them in space. There's tucking, there's all these fancy things they put on to keep them embellished. Somebody asking a question?
I just wondered about color. The pictures they tend to be quite somber. It might be just the photographs, but did they use bright colors at all?
Up until a certain point in time, your colors were natural dyes. Indigo was something that had been around forever. And the first, now, am I saying the alkaline dyes? Aniline? There were the synthetic dyes, and one of the first colors they were able to make was a mauve. And so then as more colors could be made by the synthetic dyes, then you could get brighter colors. But then you had to be careful, because there was certain colors, if you washed that in a copper kettle, it would completely change the color on it. And so you had to be so careful. And then it also, with the quality of the weaving machines, in here, I have a 1851 silk dress that the fabric is actually 18-inch wide in. We go to the store now and you get it like 36, 45, and 54 or whatever, and then God only knows how big. Where in the old days, the blooms were 18 inches wide. And it was easier, quicker, and they could control the weave of the fabric better. And then you get into your jacquards and your velvets and all those different things. And so color then becomes more as you get time moving forward. And now, these three dresses here, I made them. Reproduction. And the reason I made them, it wasn't an intention, but they offered a class on period sewing, and I wanted my mother to take it. And I'll go back one bit. When she was making these costumes, I designed them, but I was the one that calculated how much fabric to put in the waist and how to build adjustability in it. and all these various things. And then she said, well, you've got me into all this trouble. She had a serger. I was the one that sat at the serger and would serge the edge of 20, 30 yards of something so then she could put that on the flounces. She was the skilled sewer. But I would always be watching what she was doing. So they offered these classes, there was a costuming society, on how to make your own period outfit. And I wanted Mom to take it. She said, I am not. And they also was that you could make a ball gown or a man's outfit. I thought, okay, I'll go make the man's outfit. The man's outfit was canceled at the last minute. And I'm one of those people, just because I don't know how to do something, it doesn't stop me. So I signed up for the ladies' ball gown. And my sister was the person it was being made for, so this was tailor-made for her. And I made that. And there's 6 yards of fabric with 1/8 of an inch cartridge pleating all around the waist of that. And each of those cartridge pleats, there's 3 strands of thread that go, heavy thread that go through it to keep it tight right here. So that was about a 10-hour experience. You know, cartridge pleating the waist alone. And then I spent another several hours hand stitching each of those 1/8 of an inch things onto the waistband. And then, no, hemming happened later. And then this was all fitted to my sister, and there's 20-some yards of lace that's applied to this and all around there, and then making the little flowers and all the rest of it. And we had a fashion show after these were all over, and it was just before they did the first video for Province House. And people from Parks Canada were there. And I was talking to this gentleman, and we were discussing things, and it was just a general conversation about whatever. And as soon as my sister walked across the stage, his mouth fell open, and the next thing he was after somebody. We have to have that costume when we do the new video for Province House. Who made it? And somebody said, well, you're talking to the person who made it. I wasn't talking to anybody who made that. You were talking, yeah, I said you were talking to him. He was totally shocked that I made it. Anyway, I said, well, we want to rent your costume. I said, there's no way, it's tailor-made to fit my sister, and I'm not having you folks altering it. So he said, oh, would your sister consider being part of the production? Oh, well. I had to force her into that, you know, anything in front of the camera. So anyway, she got to be in it. I also made this one for my niece, a day dress. And they needed somebody with a green dress to be walking next to a lady with a burgundy dress through a garden. My niece got to be in it. So then, of course, here's me with the full Confederation outfits and all the rest of it. So I got to be in it. So this is my niece, here, Tammy, walking next to the lady with the burgundy dress on it, which is Betty Burdage. And Betty Burdage had taken the same course. So anyway, when they're filming, Nancy had a non-speaking role. And she's riding down the street in this carriage with 3 other actors and actresses. And one actress says, well, I've done this in the theater and I do that and all the rest of them. The other said something else, and the third said, and then they all looked at her, and now what do you do in the theater? And Nancy just quite bluntly said, I'm here because I've got the nicest dress. So here's the dress here. Again, and you can see the beautiful gold and how it shines. And there's a full tuxedo beside it, and here's a couple of jackets. And so this has led me into a lot of fun and unusual things. And so then here's, again, some of the beautiful jackets and little things with the lace work and all the rest of it. And this doesn't show fully, but it's actually a pair of split crotch bloomers. Because when you get all those clothes on, you can't just, you know, slip into any bathroom. So actually, the ladies' underwear were open in the crotch, and so you could squat over your chamber pot and you could use it. It may sound a little crude, but that's the way it worked. And these are other bits and pieces. These are actually fashion prints, gloves, more hand crocheted lace, some of the patterns and things. Not quite sure what that is. And this is not from the exact period, but it's the beautiful black onyx beads that are all embroidered onto it. And you can't really sew that much. I didn't bring it tonight. But Nancy Hooper, who works at the Confederation Center, she's in there for 45 years, in the costume department, trained as a milliner. And probably 15 years ago, she gave a course in making period hats. And I took her course and made that hat. And I actually even made the head form that it fits onto. So then, this is your more basic outfit. You're in the country. You got to be able to get around, you got to be able to move and work and not be constricted. So that's basically what that outfit is. And it's got very simple and basic skirt, a little pattern in the upper piece. And then in the old days, nothing was ever wasted. And so if I've got a shirt and it starts getting a little worn in spots, well, I'll get the new shirt and I'll pass this on to a younger member of the family, and maybe we'll cut it down, do some things to it, and restitch it and whatever. And there's a famous part of the story, The Christmas Carol, when Mrs. Cratchit is described as wearing a twice-turned dress. It was a solid color, and it was made up. And then when it started to wear and fade on the outside, they took it apart and restitched it so the inside became the outside, fresh and clean and all the rest of it. And when that started to wear, and the outside looked worse than the worn inside, they turned it again and they added a few bits of ribbon and some odds and ends, and it made it look good again. So, as I said, nothing was ever wasted. And it was the same with the beautiful big skirts and all those other things too. You might have 6-8 yards of fabric in a skirt, but it was just the big solid round. And then as you started transforming them into the bustles and all the rest of it, you just moved things around, reshaped it. And then, again, you've still got all this beautiful fabric, and you save the bits and pieces, and you might rework the bodice bit, change the sleeve, whatever. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with the lady Lucy von Montgomery. In her journals, her mother was married in a dress of bottle green. And her grandmother had saved it, and the fabric, and Lucy Maud, who said, I could never waste anything, talks about one evening during a snowstorm or whatever, where she had taken the skirts, and she had finally unstitched all the pieces and made it into a petticoat for herself. And she said when she walked, the silk would rustle and all the rest of it. But she had that sense of, having something that tied her to her mother, but also that she knew that it wasn't being wasted.
I lost.
Now we're talking about the Transformers.
This is a point in the lecture where technology fails, and then you switch to your.
Okay then.
It just stopped.
So, has anybody fallen asleep yet?
No.
So, if you have any questions, don't be scared to ask, and I'll do one or two things. I'll tell you exactly what I know, or I'll make up a suitable answer, and you'll probably not catch on. Gilbert, yes?
What's a mantua maker make?
What do they,
Mantua?
yeah, I think that's like a lady's dress, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what's it look like?
Well, it isn't a certain style. It just means that it's a dress.
Oh.
Oh, I can have that one real easy.
I'll look it up when I go home. It's all right.
That gold dress that you made, what material did you use?
It was a synthetic, it wasn't a silk.
There we go.
And,
It looked like a silk, yeah.
yeah, oh, it had the most lovely look to it. And my basement, the family calls it Fabricville West. When Fabricville was in Charlottetown, they had these lovely sections in the middle there where you could get very inexpensive fabric. And when you buy something for a period dress, you never buy anything less than about 10 meters because you don't know how much you'll actually need. And some of those skirts were, like, as I said, up to 6 or more, and depending what the sleeves were like and all the rest of it. So this is a hoop, and this one is completely round. So we're back to the screen again. I'll just set that aside. So, does anybody know who that is? Yeah, Dorothy, Her Honor Dorothy Lewis. And so for the 150th, she and her husband were still at Fanning Bank. And so I made the skirt, and mine went blank. She was a couture sewer, And she lived in Winslow, and she actually trained to do all these beautiful hand sewing techniques, and she could have worked in the Paris runway shows where they do couture sewing and all the rest of it. A.B. White. Anyway, she did the bodice because you've only got the hips to work with here. When you're doing a full top, you've got all the curves and body shapes and all the rest of it. I can do it, but it's a whole science in itself. And so A.B. did the jacket, and this is a beautiful satiny type that has a black and a blue reflection from it, depending what way you're looking at it. It has a pagoda sleeve. And so we did this sewing class over the winter where a bunch of women came to the house. And then we did a fashion show in conjunction with the, what do you call that dance group in Charlotte that meets at Beaconsfield?
The Beaconsfield.
Beaconsfield Dancers or whatever?
Yes.
And so we went to the Watermark Theatre and we did the fashion show of the garments that were created. And then the Beaconsfield dancers were there and they did some of the period dancers. And so, and the money we raised was split between, I think, the hospital, the Watermark Theatre and a Women's Institute charity or something. And so anyway, these are some of the other, these are more day dresses that you'd be seeing with out on the street. Again, this is my niece in the outfit. And have you ever heard the old saying, you cut your suit to suit the cloth? Or you cut your dress to suit your cloth? Okay, in this case, this was supposed to have flounces all the way around it. Well, when I got all the flounces and things on, I only had enough of this to go from there to there. So it didn't get flounces all the way around, it just got flounces in the front where this section panel could go all the way around. This was the piece underneath that could lower up and down for different heights. Again, it's got beautiful pagoda sleeves. It has the undersleeves, and around the neck of it and down the front, there's little hook and eyes. And along the edge of that closure, there is beautiful hand-tatted lace. I was in a little antique shop and somebody's grandmother made hand-tatted lace and they just had it there in sale. And there was yards of it and it was like $5 or whatever, beautiful ecru color, and I wrapped it up. And, do you want to just go back for a second? And the waistband is also attached by a hook and eye system. So when you bend over, it doesn't part and nothing shows. One doesn't go this way, one doesn't go that way. And all the techniques that they would have used then when they were doing their garments. And it also opened and closed in the front, which means you didn't need somebody else to help you get into it. And as I said, that would be a day dress for going out in public during the day, visiting and whatever. This is another dress which we actually had with us. This is your petticoats, and you could actually hitch it up so that your beautiful petticoats would show and your beautiful lace trims and all the rest of it. And the other thing you could actually do, if it was a little wet, the hitching up kept your dress from dragging in the wet grass or whatever. And so you would have your petticoats were there, the dress would just hang over the edge of them, and some of them even had a little apparatus that was attached inside, it went to little bits and pieces, and you could literally pull it here and it would bring your skirt up so it wouldn't be in the wet grass. So when you got your going, you didn't have this wet piece all around the bottom. And the bottom edges of dresses, what they did is they take a piece of heavier fabric and it would be show for probably about a ½ an inch on the outside and it would come up 5 or 6 inches from the inside. It stiffened the edge and made it hold a nice edge, but also if it was mud and dirt was getting onto it, you could brush it off the inside and it wouldn't necessarily come up as easily in the front, and you wouldn't get the worn line along the edge where like a crease of a jean or something where it's dragging. And this is only at the front, and so it's a little jacket again with the pagoda sleeves, but it's not a full blouse and a full jacket. It's the full jacket, but the blouse is just inserted into the front of it, so you put it on by buttoning it up and down the front. This is actually, those two girls that just were there were my nieces, and this is my sister. And so again, her dress here. And when we did the 150th no, the 125th in Charlottetown waterfront, Anita would go in and she'd do hand sewing and period reproduction clothing, and people could walk up and talk to her. And so that was the outfit that she wore. This is another friend of ours, Betty, and so she has the little diamond points here, the sleeves that just come down there. Again, the detachable sleeves here. Of course, everybody should have had gloves on. And the little sleeves, the little collar cameo up there, and this one just goes straight to the ground, and so it's just the one left. This is a lady's day dress. Again, I made this one for my sister. It has the detachable white cuffs, and I don't think the collar's not on that day. Mine must have been slipping up there. And again, it just attached across here, and again, a cartridge pleated around the waist. This is my mother, that first started doing the sewing. And remember I said about spending all the hours pleating, and this is lace here, actually, I think I said ribbon, this is actually lace. And you'd take it and you'd pleat it 3 or 4 times, you'd stitch together, and then you'd fan it out, and you'd tack it along the fans, and then you'd go another few inches and do it. And so there's probably 8 or 9 yards of lace finished pleating on that, and then there's layers of lace here, and this is the fabric that you get the wood grain look to, moire. And this was a black moire up here, more here, and then I took and made her another little cap with a snood in the back. And you, of course, most ladies had long hair, so your hair would be held up in this little lace bag at the back, and then you'd have more lace up in the top, and it was called a snood. And then just a nice blouse underneath. And her hoop is like straight from and it down, where some of them were more bell-shaped or full dome or whatever. There was all kinds of different variations and styles of hoops. This is one I made for my sister Vivian. So this is the puff sleeves, lace trims, cartridge pleated waist. I get into the habit and I continued to do it. And more lace around the collar, and her fan to match, and the gold jewelry, and again, straight to the floor. And all hemmed for her, one person to wear it. This is when they did something for the 150th again, and we showed up. Oh, they were bringing the Fathers of Confederation in, and they wanted a bunch of people dressed in period costume. So this is a cousin of mine, Vernal Lynn Weeks. This is her daughter, Katie. This is Betty Berdage and her sister, Paula Kenny, and her sister Marie. Marie has the blouse, her shawl, and the skirt, where Paula has the full outfit matching top and bottom. And they both have their bonnets on with their feathers and all the various things. And at one time, feathers became so popular in ladies' hats, they were a larger contributing factor towards extinction than hunting just for meat. And that's me with my cane there with the gold head on it. And then here, the capes. Capes were a great big, like a big thing, and the ladies' capes in particular were very full in the bottom, so they'd drape out over your hoops. And yeah, that's in the kitchen at home. Now this here is a period piece, and if you look carefully, this is strips of very beautifully done lace.
Sorry.
Back up a bit. Oh, actually, you can go forward, I think. So we'll read this here. Christening gown made around 1870 by my grandmother, Mrs. William Graham Whitehead of Graham's Road. The stitching is all done by hand, and this is Robina Houston, I believe, from North Granville, that wrote that. So you can see here, each of these are narrow strips, each hand stitched together to give you this beautiful design. Cartridge pleating, and it's a beautiful, and then more around the top, all these things here. And now if you go back to the very first picture, christening gowns were always made very long, and look at all the beautiful work. And these are little folded over 1/4 of an inch and hand stitched to give it more detail. Now these are very narrow, so they're purely decorative. But if you've got a petticoat,
Are they kept in a museum now or what?
that's in a private collection. Family still has it. But pretend I'm a young lady and I've been given a new petticoat, and I put it on, it's too long. darn, I'm gonna complain. No, I'm gonna fold it up an inch, press the edge of it, stitch it, and then it folds back down, and I've got this nice pattern around. Perhaps it was 3 or 4 inches long, I'll do 3 or 4 of those.
We're still doing that in the 60s.
Yeah. So what you've done is you've added this beautiful design to your petticoat just by folding it over and stitching it. And then I pass it on to my sister. She's taller, she can let one of those out. Or she's shorter again, she can add a 5th one. And it was just ways of making garments work for multiple people. And this is almost in perfect condition except for right here. And what you see here, this would be machine lace. Yes, that would be machine lace. But people crocheted, and they love to crochet and do handiwork and embellishments. And so a lot of these older clothing too, they would do very beautiful handwork on them. Now, we're into children's outfits, and again, this is from a Godey's Fashion magazine, 1864. And, well, would you send your child out to play looking like that? And this, you've got the boys mixed them in amongst here and all the rest of it. But it gave you an idea what the basic shape and design of the garment was, and if you want to be fashionable. But now here's a family picture, and look at them. And the little girl sitting here, and the ringlets, and the bows in her hair, and all the rest of it, and the little tiny curls. And unfortunately, especially in Sundays, they want kids to look at that all day. Or that if you were from a wealthy family, they'd put you out in the yard, and they'd want you to give a good impression of the family and expect you to come back looking like they'd sent you out. And look at it. And now, this little person here, and who says about mixing patterns? You get the striped check plaid type coat, and then there's another one that's hanging going down under here, and then a scarf with all this beautiful stuff on there. But you're going for your picture. So they're going to put all your best on you, because this is going to be, you know, frozen in time for centuries to come, and here it is today. And again, these are my niece and Betty Berdage's daughter. Leon is what, 38 now? Wait till I tell her I've showed this picture to everybody. But you get all the little, you know, ruches and flowers and laces, and again, the pagoda sleeves. We didn't put the fall sleeves, but we made the little hats for them. This is a little boy. Now, this is actually a charcoal drawing, but it's still, there's your little ties and all the rest of it. You can see where the little lapels fall in the jacket. So if you're making a child's outfit, you could use this for a time and period. Okay. What do you think the sex is?
Yeah.
That's 3 little boys. And their father was a tailor. Look at the ringlets, the big bows, the skirt, and notice what the belts are doing? Hanging very loose, because it was not considered appropriate to put anything tight around a child's stomach. It could restrict their digestion and cause bowel issues. And so, matching socks, shoes, this one's got buttons in the side, this one's laced, I'm not sure, but you've got all of this beautiful work into that. And look, all the laces and all the rest of it. But little boys were dressed in these little dressy outfits like that until they were probably 6 or more years old. And then after that, they get dressing in more outfits that would look like an adult male. But you know, we actually got that from a friend, and it was inscribed in the back who they were and all the rest of it, and we got the copy from it, so you know the full providence behind it.
How old was that? What year?
We didn't take a picture of the back of this, and I don't think it was actually the year was on the back of it, but we could actually find out. This would be probably more in the I'm not sure. This could be up into the 1890s or early 1900s. But I just like the picture and now look at this little guy here, the kilt. But the wide lace cuffs and the big lace collar. And I remember one time of actually being able to go in close and read the name of the ship that was on the band of the hat. So their father may have been in the Navy or whatever, and he got the hat and everything to go with, and the big military buttons on it. And this is from Charlottetown, Prince Edward. Yes?
In that previous photo, where would they have acquired the socks? Would they have bought them?
Oh yes, those socks would have been bought. I couldn't imagine anybody actually knitting those. But not that it would be impossible to knit them. So now we're into men's clothing. And this is from the 1850s. And you'll see full chest, narrow waist, artist rendering. And so you look at the waist and compared to the shoulders and the necks and all the rest of it. It's really not properly scaled in proportion, but it shows you what you want a style to resemble. Now, this person here has got the collar sticking up, and framing his chin, and these have the collars underneath, and they used to starch those collars, and they used to say that they would slit your throat. They were so hard and stiff, and they were detachable. So you took them off, and you had them laundered, and sent them out, and all the rest of it. And remember the nurses' things, and they told all the stories about how they waxed, or all the things they did those to make them so stiff and hard and all that. Those collars were done the same thing. And then I think they got to the point where they even used to have what they called celluloid collars, which were even stiffer and harder. And here, the bow ties. I'm missing a bow tie this evening. I couldn't find it, I'm sorry. Do you want to just go back one, please, Carter? And so here, you've got contrasting colors of pants to the jackets. You've got contrasting colors of ties. This guy here is more where it wraps around and ties out front. These ties here just come around once. And it was a sign of a true gentleman when they could tie their own tie. And so as a father of Confederation, we were expected to wear the ties that had to be tied. And I'm mildly dyslexic. You stand me in front of a mirror and try to get me to tie a tie. So what I did, I measured my neck, I took the measuring tape and put it around the leg, and found the spot of my leg was the same size as my neck. And then I started tying it, watching what I was doing, tying it on my leg. And then when I could tie it on my leg, watching myself, then I started looking at the ceiling, tying it on my leg. And when I could tie it on my leg without watching myself, then I started tying it around my neck. And I mastered it. And so there's all these different things that you would do. Some of the collars just went up straight, some had the little tip down points that would help hold the collar in. Now these are your over jacket. This had the little cape, and I can't think of the name of that type of jacket, but, and then top hats. This is more of an overcoat. This is an undercoat and the curved out corners. This is more of a shorter coat here, and it just comes in buttons down there. So again, many different styles. This has the little bent points. This has the straight collar there. And it was the felt hats that fueled the fur trade initially in Canada. They wanted the beaver fur to felting to make the beaver hats. And people thought, oh, well, they took the beaver skins and all the rest. No, it was the fur off it. They were able to felt it somehow or other and make those caps, or hats. And then there was always variations in style. You can see these where it's not completely round, it curves down the front and curves up in the edges, and there's all kinds of different variations in size and height. And there's these pictures of Abraham Lincoln, and they called them the stovepipe hats, like they were literally like this high, others were shorter. And in part of the family history, I'm connected with the Hart's family in Charlottetown. And one of the stories that came down through it was that he could get a little angry at times, and it was Mrs. Hart's, who was a Howard, and that's how I connected to the family, who managed to keep things calm. And he went out to a lecture or a talk one evening, and when he left, there was just one hat left up in the thing, and it wasn't his. And he had lost his good fur hat, and he had this old scruffy beat up thing. And when he brought it home, his wife came to the conclusion that there was something living in the hat besides just his head a few minutes ago. And so she took with 2 sticks and dropped it in the fireplace, and he was even madder that he didn't even get a decent hat. And so some kid was taken and blackened that poor guy's out. But you can see the hat isn't near as turned up at the side. You've got the lapels, this here, but these buttons button, but the coat slopes away. Again, different size. And then they also have the frock coat that had come down straight, buttoned to here, and then it hung straight below that. So there were ever changing little details here and there along the way, whether the pant legs were tight, whether the, yeah, see, buttoned up here, sloping away. And also, if you buttoned it and then you tried to sit down, then so you're better off unbuttoning, then you could space it out behind you. And again, how the tie works, and then all the different lapels, very narrow lapels, whether they were lined with silk or it was the same fabric. It was just like very, and now this again is a later period, but it's the four men, these could be four brothers, I would say, for a family photograph. And again, the watch chain's very important. And if you had a watch fob, this watch fob is actually rose gold. It's gold with copper alloy in it, and it gives it that rosy color. The chain is just any old thing. And so, again, you'll see the details and the cuts and all the rest of it. And now this is me and two of the other fathers of Confederation back when we did that in '89. And so you can see the different types of vests and the pants and all the rest of it, and a fullness, excuse me, a fullness in the leg. Lost your connection? I think, wasn't that the last picture anyway?
Standing on the right of the,
Oh,
there it is.
okay. Her Honor, Marion Reed. Her husband, Lee Reed, Andrew A. McDonald, and Raina Titian, and his wife. And the grounds of Fanning Bank. And there we are, a few fathers taking the stance in behind them. And in '92, with us we have a couple of the mothers of Confederation. And so there we are. Now, I think this is the oldest piece of clothing I have in my collection. The other summer, there was an online auction of a house in Charlottetown. And there was a closet full of clothing, and most of them you could look at and you'd say, well, it's Crimplene, whatever. They're probably the 60s, 70s period. But hanging in the middle of it was that. And I was pretty sure it was more than just something. So we went into the viewing, and sure enough, I knew it was pre-1864. And I put a bid in the closet full of clothes, and I got them for $6. And the Crimplene outfits were the Jackie O style. Beautifully, beautifully done, well cut, tailored, and all the rest of it. And I think half of them were handmade, the other half were bought. But this was totally 100% handmade from the 18-inch strips of shot silk, which there's one color runs this way and one color runs that way, and it's a beautiful, so here's the details on it. The lady was, I contacted the family, they gave me the information. She was buried in Boxing Day, December 26, 1851. It has her name, and then how it has come down to, and then I added a little bit at the last. The waist is 26 inches, the circumference of the hem is 12 feet. And when the person made it originally, they put extra fabric inside the bodice, and somebody wore it once to a special event back in the 40s or 50s, and they sweated profusely in it and badly stained it under the arm. And then somebody took it apart and found the extra fabric in the bodice, and repaired this as best they could. And it would have been worn with several petticoats. I just have a small hoop here to put it over tonight. Is there another one? Oh, in 2008 was the 100th anniversary of the production of writing the book Anne of Green Gables. So in Cavendish, we pulled out all the stops. My sister and I created 128 costume pieces, not 100 costumes, but pieces for costumes. And at the same time, Confederation Center contacted me and asked me to create, and my sister was helping me, a reproduction of the dress with puff sleeves based on 2 pictures that Lucy Mott had cut and put into her scrapbook. She was born in 1874. These would be from the 1890s. And when Anne is a little girl, she wants to dress with puff sleeves, so Lucy Maud would have had the same ambitions when she was a child. And so she cut these out, put them in her scrapbook. We chose this of the two. Carter? Oh, the waist and the neck are the same size. And by scale and proportion, the sleeves were 4 feet wide. One more picture, Carter? Or two?
Those are the last two pictures.
Yeah.
Oh,
There.
it is.
So this is what we create. It is all the same characteristics, it just doesn't have as much embellishments on it, but it, all these laces, all this trims down here or there. It's just the fabric that's lasting, all the extra bead work or embellishments they had on it. So, and when we were making it, we had no pattern, and partway in they said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if it was the size of Lucy Maud Montgomery? Fortunately, we had the dimensions from her wedding dress, and we were able to build that into it. It laced up the back, there was this beautiful piece here, and it trailed out behind. And this worked with petticoats and crinolines, no hoops under this one. So we still have it in the family collection, and then in 2011, we reproduced the trousseau from Lucy Maud's photographs that she had taken of. No pictures of the wedding dress, but just the trousseau dresses. And a grand aunt, her name was Annie Stabbard. She was Annie Stabbard from Summerside. And she was a milliner and she worked at Holman's. My Uncle Ben Sharp worked in the men's section at Holman's, and they got together and they were married. And so she had collected ladies' magazines. And I thought there was like a stack of this many. My mother's double first cousin inherited them. And I said to her one day, could I borrow them? We're doing this project with the wedding trousseau. And just to get a few ideas from her. Oh, she said, I'll give them all to you. Stack that high, from 1908 to 1918. And the wonderful old magazines that have a picture and that have two little line drawings beside it that showed all the pattern pieces. So when we saw the front of Lucy Maud's trousseau pictures, we had no idea what the backs looked like. So we found dresses that were the same style, and then looked at the little line drawings for the back of them. And then you could see whether the back went down like this or whether around the neck and how they curved in and how many pieces they had. So we were able to use those magazines for reproducing. So we're back here where it started at, this good-looking guy here. I'm not only intelligent, I'm humble too. And good-looking to boot. God, you fellas are gullible if you believe all that. So, the first thing I'm going to bring out here is the 1851 dress. Now, they do say that the mind can only take in what the ass can endure. Does anybody want to stand up and stretch their legs for a moment while I'm getting this outfit on here? Feel free to do so. So you can see the shades of green and purple in it? And see the very thin sleeves. This is actually completely separate from the bodice. It's just on there for decoration. And with all the little piping along. You take a fine piece of thread or cord, in this case cord, and they wrap the fabric around, stitch it, and then put it between the seams. And where you can't get them to match perfectly, it gives a definition, or breaks it up, and it's not quite so obvious. And there's piping in the shoulders and all around. So that's the oldest thing I know that I definitely have in the collection, because I have the provenance that goes with it. And so, oh. There's a concealed pocket in one of the seams here. Carter says it's in the front, but I don't think so. Right here. So you could slide, in this case you're going to be at a ball, and you're going to be given a little tiny booklet and a pencil, and there's going to be dances, and you can write the gentleman's name in for various dances. And
It's a wedding dress.
yes, but it was also been worn after that for very special occasions because it's not white. And so, or a place to keep a hanky or whatever. And you could just, but it'd always generally be on a seam and tucked in carefully at one side. And another thing you could do, this actually has the pocket, but the seam could open up, and laying over the petticoat, you had these wonderful, what they called a pocket that tied around your waist, and you could reach in, and then you could keep things in there.
And that fabric is.
Silk. And again, it was
Must have been good quality, so-
very good quality. So, yeah, and you can see here where they pieced in underneath the arms to cover where the sweat stains were. But it's very unusual. This dress meant a lot to the lady that wore it, and the family treasured it after that, so nobody cut it up, nobody did other things with it. But, you know, as I said, look at all that beautiful silk. If somebody else needs a new dress, the style's changing, we'll make a bustle out of it. I'll turn it around so you can see the back. There's hooks and eyes up and down the back here, and this barely fits, so I'm not going to stretch the fabric. And so anyway. But so with the provenance and all the rest of it, you know exactly what that person was sewing at the time, based upon her abilities, or maybe they had somebody come in that sewed it for her.
You must have been excited to find that.
And for $6 for a whole closet full. Another thing is, I'm one of those people that somebody's cleaning out a closet and nobody in the family wants things. Arnold, would you like this? And sometimes they're almost embarrassed to offer it to me. I was once given 2 boxes full of the most beautiful lace embellishments and fancy cuffs and collars that had been cut off, beautiful outfits that people thought they might be able to use sometime, but the collection kept on growing, and it was tucked up. They moved into a house and they found this tucked up on the eaves of the attic, and the mother didn't want to throw them out, and the children wanted her to get rid of them because they had to clean out the house. She said, "I'll ask Arnold." "Oh no, you can't ask somebody." No. They bumped into me at the grocery store. The daughter was with them. The mother asked me, and the poor daughter, you could see her getting ready to lap right through the floor. I said, "Sure, I'd love to have them," not knowing what I was getting. They arrived out with this box full of stuff, and the most beautiful spider web crocheting and lace making, and it was exceptionally valuable. If nothing, and some of them were even what they called pneumonia blouses. They were so thin that the clergy said that women that wore them were going to catch pneumonia and die. They were just scandalous. You could see through them and all the rest of it. And there were all these beautiful things in there. And even though you don't have the whole garment, you know how they embellish things. Or if I was making a piece for display only, you could take and get modern fabric, and then you could attach these things to it. They were just, it was a treasure. Dishes. I don't know how many sets of dishes I've been given over the years because the younger generations don't want them. And my niece was getting married 4 years ago, and she saw a beautiful silver tea service we had, silver plate. And she said, "Wouldn't it be nice, Uncle Arnold, if we could have one of those in the center of each table at the wedding?" I said, "Sure. How many tables is it going to be?" 18. I worked with Dennis next door when he had the auctions here. And over the next year, I collected 18 silver tea services for him. The only problem was these silver tea services would come in banana boxes full of other bits and pieces. Candlesticks and serving bowls and little trays and big trays and all kinds of paraphernalia. So now we have a room that we refer to as the silver chest because it's full of this stuff. We sold some of them, but and the other thing is I have a dining room table that stretches out fully 18 feet. And so when we set that up and we put on the dog, it's covered with silver from end to end, and it's all sparkles and polish and all the rest of it. And I'll not bother putting this one on the mannequin, but this is another period piece. And you can see where all the seams were hand stitched together. It's lined. And it's a beautiful little jacket. the little lace, oh, I was holding it upside down, the peplum across the back, the lace collars, the ruchings all around. It's spectacular. This one was made to be worn with a bustle, but there's the pockets that are inside there. And this piece of cotton is a polished cotton, or a chintz. And have you ever heard anybody refer to, oh, they're just chintzy, those people, chintzy? Well, what it means is they used to take cheap cotton, they'd put a beautiful design on it, and polish it with wax that made it shine like silk. And so they were trying to make cotton look like silk. And if you tried to take, you know, if you were cheap, but you were trying to pretend it was something else, you were being chintzy. And so there's, and again, all of this here. So, this is one of the capes. I'm going to pick on you for a minute if you don't mind standing up. So there's two armholes there that you can turn around. Yeah, slide there. So, there. So you can wear it as a jacket with your arms out, and you have the little cape over your shoulders to give you extra protection in your shoulder. If it gets a little wetter, it'll help run off the rain. It's got all this beautiful, brain's gone blank again. Bias tape around the edge of it, and it curves, and then the same down here, all around there. Now, pull your arm in. Yeah, and then we're just going to set it over your shoulder. And then, look, there's an armhole down here. And now you've got your full skirt on, and I've got a beautiful fur muff, and she can slide her hands into it. And again, this is going to keep her shoulders warm and all the rest of it. And you've got that nice jacket, and it's long, and it's going to keep you nice and warm. It's a cape, actually, I should call it.
Wool?
Yes. And because it's wool, it's the same inside and out. So you don't have to line it, but you could line it again if you wanted to.
The top bit wouldn't pull up as a hood, would it?
No, this is just a little cape. It doesn't actually,
Okay.
but some of them, we have made them that pull up and actually are like a cape. And we'll pick you now. Now this doesn't have arms. This just is a cape. And so, again, it's a little narrower that way, but it hangs down, covers up your garment. And the design on there, what do you call that pattern? Okay, do you know why it's called a paisley?
From Paisley in Scotland.
Paisley in Scotland. Do you know where it started at? If you were sitting in a cool house in a cold evening and you wanted to pull something up over you, what would you pull up onto you that somebody maybe crocheted for you? An Afghan. And when the British went to Afghanistan, the Afghan people used to weave these beautiful paisley designs, as we call them now, and then they'd hand stitch them into shawls, and the men brought it back for their wives and somebody special, maybe their mother, whoever. And then in Scotland, in Paisley, they invented looms that could actually weave them, those designs, but only around the edges of the fabric initially, and then eventually they were able to do it over the whole design. And the mills that they did it in were in Paisley, Scotland, so everybody called these Paisley shawls. But the pattern and the idea concept came from Afghanistan. And each one of those little design Paisleys were woven individually and then hand-stitched together. And wouldn't it be nice if we actually had one of those? Well, I had a grand aunt. Her name was Aunt Jenny. And when Aunt Jenny, before she died, she had this house in Pleasant Valley, and she took my mother over there one day and she gave her this piece of fabric with the beautiful designs in it. Little nosy here got one day examining real closely and came up with a conclusion that it was actually individual Paisley sewn together. Now this is back before 1977. It was tucked away safely upstairs in the house, And on January 10th, 1977, the house went up in smoke, and that went with it. But it was only afterwards, when we were doing in the 80s, when we were doing these things for the Fathers of the Confederation, they were telling us the story and the history, and all this here, that I realized what we'd actually had that went up in smoke. But everything else we owned went up in smoke too, so there was no sense quarreling over a piece of cloth that nobody had really know or appreciated what it was. And you never really know what you're going to have until you find out later on. So now this is a modern, we would call this pashmina or something, but again, this is just the modern versions of those things. But they put the gold sparkles through them and they look quite nice, and they make lovely shawls and all the rest of it. Oh, I said that I forgot to put the collar in this. There actually isn't a collar for it. But here's the gathered sleeves over the shoulders. The shoulders are big enough that you can actually work in this, get around the house, but you wouldn't be doing hard work. There's your cuffs. Oh, this is the front here. Again, you would be able to put this on yourself, and it went buttoned up and down the front with snaps. So that was the other thing. You know, if you were wealthy, your garments went on from the back. If it was something you didn't have a lady's maid or somebody to help you, then they had to be closure in the front, or maybe under the arm, the piece coming across. And this is the cottons, the print cottons, and all the beautiful designs you get into those.
How did they allow for pregnancy?
You would have pregnancy outfits, and then they would design little channels with drop cords in them that you could keep on loosening them out. And then there was special corsets that you had that would try to conceal things as long as possible. And then once things became visible, other than to your immediate family, you vanished. And if you were a teacher, if something like that became obvious, you were not a teacher anymore or any kind of a public person. Here's the little jacket I was telling you about that I made, or the outfit part of the one I made for my sister, or my niece. And you can see the piping down there, the little snaps here where they hook the skirt onto it, the hand-tatted lace, everything all fitted together, and beautiful tapered, and this is actually lined as well. And the lining would help give the fabric more substance, and you'd be wearing this over a corset as well, so it wouldn't just be falling around. And this is the skirt here, and so this is where the, see, it stops there. My sister and I had a motel for 40 years, so the old bed sheets made wonderful foundations for attaching everything else to. Or the first time you wanted to do something, you would cut it out of an old bed sheet, and you would fit it and see how it draped and what happened and how it was going to look. So there's the, and that's just the beautiful fabric, and then the cartridge pleating around the top.
Explain cartridge.
Cartridge pleating. Okay, it comes from a phrase like a cartridge belt for putting bullets into. So you make a fold, and you take your needle and you push it through, fanning, like a fan.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go through each row, and you go through it 2 or 3 times, depending on how tight you want to keep it around the top and going down. And then you just keep your needles going, like you might do like 8 inches, and then you take the next needle, go 8 inches, the next needle, and then you pull it all back, and you keep on going. And you'd have to do it with very long pieces of thread so that you could keep on shoving it on, and because if you ever ran out, your thread was short in the middle, then you couldn't tie a knot into it because you couldn't tighten it up or loosen it when you were trying to gather it all together. This is my sister's ball gown. Hooked a hanger here, or it hooked me.
Wow. And you made that?
Yep. I'm not just here for my good looks.
Arnold.
Put it in the mannequin. It's going to be too big for the mannequin, but I can drape it over it.
Wow. Wow.
So how long would it take you to make a garment like
oh, I know the skirt was over 12 hours just for getting the cartridge pleating and hand stitched onto the waistband before it was even attached to the bodice.
And you're doing a lot of hand sewing there, so.
Yeah, my father always said about me, and excuse me if it sounds a little crude, but that I had the patience to pick fly dirt at a pepper, and he didn't use the word fly dirt.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're doing that, it's very methodical. That was a real blizzard in the winter, and I just started doing it in the morning, and I just kept on at it. Unfortunately now, we're way too busy in all the other things we're doing to actually be doing these things.
Yeah.
But there's something about it, hand stitching and creating something and seeing it all come together. And it laces up the back. And then you have this lace here with that you can see through, and all the other bits and pieces, and these little pieces that look like ties, and all mitered here at the corners. And
What are the white flowers on the front?
that was, it's not quite a silk, it's a very thin fabric, and I made each of those. And another book I have, I didn't bring it tonight because it isn't for this period, was hand embellished buttons. And they would take wooden forms and different things, and they would do all kinds of beautiful crochet work. You cover them with the silk or something, then you do beautiful crochet work over them. They do wrap them with embroidery thread and make very intricate designs. And people spent hours doing these things. Because firstly, it showed that you had skill and ability. And secondly, you could create these wonderful details that you wouldn't have to buy to make your garments stay out. And buttons were one of those things that people treasured. And even the most basic buttons. As a child, we had a glass jar. And really bad weather days, the mom couldn't get us into the house to get out of her hair and give her some peace and quiet. It'd be dumped on the table, sort the buttons. And we'd spend hours doing it, matching them all up. And nothing was ever thrown out but into a dust rag. Nothing was thrown out, but it'd be made into a dust rag or whatever. All the buttons would be cut off, and zippers cut out of things, and all the rest of it. And you never wanted to waste anything. And so then here's some of the petticoats, and I think this actually may have been the one that actually went with Nancy's outfit. So you have the beautiful eyelet lace around the bottom, and then a cotton sheet from the motel. And this is when they were no longer needed, and so then all that fullness would help over the hoops, take the ring of the hoops out. And oh yeah, it was and then if you had a real light ball gown, you would use very sheer hoop or petticoats to underneath it to give it a little bit of substance and create lightness to it. And then here's the little outfit here. Let's see, it's just sewn into the front of it to give the effect of a blouse, and it buttons up the front. Again.
What's that thing fabric?
Again, fabric fill. Just a stripe, and these would be synthetics. It wouldn't be like pure whatevers that they would have used years ago. It would have been just too expensive to buy it. So, in case you think I've forgotten about the men, actually came from the auction next door. It's a little tuxedo set. So there's the jacket, a little piece of dryer sheet to keep it fresh, the vest, and then I know I have the complete set pants go? Oh, they fell off the hanger. But anyway, the top of the pants that go with this have the same vest lining piece that goes around the top of the pants. So it's a complete outfit, and it is a frock coat, and it's cut straight down the front.
Quite a big slit in the back.
Yeah, that's so that you can actually sit in it or ride a horse or whatever.
How old is it?
Oh, this would be, I don't know if I can say completely 1860s, but it could be 1890s, turn of the century, because
I think you might
I'll attach this better. Shut it up?
Well,
Oh, I can, it just didn't attach it tight enough.
Wow. And you got it in an auction next door.
Yeah.
I think you two must be related.
Now, this here jacket is called a mourning coat. Nothing to do with death and dying. It would be a fancy jacket to wear to a mourning affair. And it swoops. Now, it's much too big for me, but also at the 1860s, they did cutaway jackets like this too. But the modern version is now called a mourning coat. And do you ever watch Downton Abbey? And one show, one of the butlers was being a pain in the tail, and the servants decided to teach him a lesson by switching out the master's proper evening wear, and he had to go down with the wrong kind of tie, whether it was black tie or white tie, whatever it was. And Lady Grantham looks at him and says, "Could I have a drink?" "Oh, I thought you were one of the servants." Because he didn't have the right tie and everything according to the moment in time. And with these pants, they were higher waisted, and they'd have little buckles at the back. So you could tighten them here, across the back, and all the rest of it, and all were worn with suspenders. No belts. Now it's just a basic white shirt that's there, it's not the right style. Now, this is a much older version of the cutaway jacket. And even in the 1860s, they did have what they called a sack coat. And it was basically a straight cut, and it was for a much more casual thing, like a merchant working in a store, or somebody would wear it or whatever, and who wasn't pretending to be affluent. But the more affluent you got, the more stylish your coats and that were expected to be. But again, cut away, and this is, I think it's got a green cast to it, doesn't it? Yeah, and these buttons are covered with silk to match the outfit. And you would make those up to match the outfit. And now, in all the rooting around, I forgot to bring a swallowtail coat. But this is like a little military jacket. And now this is, again, more modern, but it's the same styles were worn way back when. But with your swallowtail coat, the tail started here and went down. And they usually didn't have many pockets at the front, and there'd be two little pockets into the tail of the coat if you had to slide a pair of gloves or something. And then this buttoned over. So all these styles you have nowadays have their foundations way back in times past. Now, I'm sure you probably might have a question or two, which you'll be only too glad to answer.
Oh, I'm very impressed by and making all those things.
Were you always interested in clothing and sewing for a young age?
I was always interested in anything that had to do with the past. At a young age, it was my mother I would watch. She was going to make herself, well, there's a wedding or something. I need a new whatever. She'd go to town, couldn't find what she wanted. She'd come home with some fabric, and she would be making herself something. And then at some point, I don't like the sleeve in this. I don't like the cuff. I don't like the collar. And the piece of the pattern would be laid out on a piece of newspaper, and she'd be marking around it, and she'd be making a new pattern piece. And I always saw her doing those things. As a child, I was more interested in, we'll say, building things, and when people ask me what I wanted to do when I was a kid, now this is in Pleasant Valley, Prince Edward Island, not the backwoods wilderness, but just not anywhere where everybody knew what the word was. I wanted to be an architect. Well, it didn't quite happen, but I got myself a wonderful craftsman. And so then the family history, the construction of old buildings, how people cooked and lived in the old days. And my father's farm is 500 acres, well, he's passed away 10 years ago, it's my mother's now, but it's 500 acres. And on that, there was 9 original farms, and there's still remnants of some of the old buildings. And I went through those old buildings and figured out how they were all put together in the barns, post and beam and all the rest of it. Couldn't get enough of it. Listening to the old folks talking about family history and all those other things, and the family stories. And so the sewing really didn't kick in until I was involved with Parks and People, and these costumes had to be made, and I really got helping Mom in earnest. And then, as I said, I didn't know how to do it, but it didn't stop me. And that's how all principles in my life work. It's not that I know how to do something, it's just that I'm going to do it anyway, to the best of my ability, do a bit of research.
Just a comment, I think this is fantastic. I heard you 4 years ago, and I sensed your passion at that time. But to have a whole family come together and do all this, to me, is remarkable. And one other point I want to make is that your story is videoed. And that is important, because we don't video our history enough.
Yeah.
And maybe 25 or 30 years from now, someone will watch this, and that will help carry the torch of heritage.
And I think that sometimes that's our biggest regret, is that when people were gone, if I'd only listened a little harder, if I had only paid, why didn't we record that, or why didn't we? And it's getting to the point now, we did a community history in Pleasant Valley, and I spent all those childhood years sucking all this information like a sponge, only to realize that I didn't remember all the details, or maybe I didn't have all the stories, or couldn't keep all the names right. But one thing I'm very good at is playing, now where are you from and who's your father? And because the family's been here since 1780 and the last came in 1859, it's surprising the number of people you can find connections to, or ways you can interconnect. And when the tourists came to the motel, and you might know somebody from the community where their family was from, and you could connect them up, or you could tell them stories about what their ancestors' lives would have been like here. And right now, I'm chairman of the board of the Farmers Bank. And I was on the board for 30 years, and chairman for the last 7, and for the last 3 years, Carter and I have been spending 365 days of the year. We were able to raise, through very clever application writing, $475,000 for restoration work and ongoing things to take and make the place sustainable, because we had lost our 72 motor coach tours, which were our bread and butter. Now we're working our way into the experiential tourism, offering the meals in the Doucet House, the oldest structure in Prince Edward Island. And I'm there, and I'm babbling on about Acadian culture and all the rest of it, and then every now and again they'll say, oh, and which Acadian family are you from? Well, my French ancestry goes back to 1066, when William the Conqueror, the boys, went to England for the weekend and took over the country. And then later on, there was some French Huguenots fled from France. They were French Protestants. The Catholics weren't very happy with them. And they fled from France to England and to Ireland and married in with the Weekses and came over with them and the Howards. But anyway, you don't have to be something to have an interest in it. And sometimes I find the people that have the greatest interest, nothing against Islanders, are people who come from away. And they happen to be interested in history and all the rest of it. If you're raised in it and it doesn't interest you, it's like, who cares? But if you have an interest for it, great. But there's other people who lived here their whole lives and they don't know who their grandparents are. Where I can go back 6 generations and kind of connect and all the rest of it. So sometimes, and you know, the other thing is you can't shut me up.
Delightful, delightful.
So if anybody wants a closer look at that stuff, please do. Anybody else that needs an escape to stretch?
Well, that was fascinating.
Thank you.
Arnold, it was a terrific presentation. Very different from the presentation of 4 years ago. Much more use of visual images from the past. And so we appreciate that terrifically. You set the scene in the 1860s and 70s in terms of costume and how different it was from the present time. So let's express if people have individual questions or want to examine, Arnold will be here at the front. I just want to say, mention our next talk. Arnold mentioned Lucy Maud Montgomery, and the next talk is actually on the subject of Ellen Montgomery, and it's one of Prince Edward Island's top Montgomery scholars from the University of Prince Edward Island, Dr. Jean Mitchell, who is going to talk about, oh, by the way, Montgomery was born in 1874, so 1 year after Prince Edward Island became part of Canada. So she was among the first generation of people on the island who actually grew up as Canadians. And it took a while, I think, for them to identify as Canadians, but she was in that generation. Of course, later on, she went to live in Ontario and spent much of her life there. So the title of her talk is Reading Prince Edward Island History through Ellen Montgomery's writings, including both her journals and also some of her novels. The talk, that's next Monday at 7 p.m. in the room here. The AGM of the Bedeck Area Historical Society will follow at 8, but you don't have to stay for the AGM. The following week, continuing the series, on the 31st of July, George Arsenault is going to talk about the island's Acadian community and confederation, and how the Acadians reacted or how they participated and what was the effect on the Acadians. And then a week later, on August 7th, Dr. Matthew McRae, the head of the Prince Edward Island Museum and Heritage Foundation, is going to look at one of the after effects, the celebration of Confederation, under the title Celebrating the Cradle, Nationalism, Tourism, and the 1964 and 1973 centennials. And then the final talk on the 14th of August, we're bringing back Dr. Edward MacDonald, who was here last week looking at the political events of the 1860s and 70s. And he's going to look in a broad sweep over a century of enshrined island tourism and the Confederation story, how something that was considered very undesirable and the island, as he explained last week, reluctantly entered Confederation and without any celebration. We'd lost our independence, but in the next century we began to think, how can we attract tourists using this theme that our ancestors didn't really want to be part of Canada. So just a final point, we have a raffle, a seafood raffle. We